One of the most frequently asked questions on Backyard Farmer, and sometimes the most frustrating, is what do we grow underneath trees? What turf works best under trees? Or often more frustrating is when they say, we've been trying to grow turf underneath these trees for years and years and years, and we can't get anything to grow. Well, there's a reason for that. There are certain species that do better in shade, certain turf cultivars that do better in shade, and what we want to do is kind of describe to you the various situations where turf is appropriate, turf is not appropriate, and what you can do to best manage turf when it is growing in heavy shade. Before we can get into an in-depth discussion about why turf sometimes grows very well in certain shade conditions and other times it doesn't, we need to understand a little bit about light quality and light quantity. Light quality is the spectrum that the turf, or any plant for that matter, sees. And photosynthetically, what we want to have, the carbohydrate producing spectrum, is usually in the yellow and the greens. When sun hits a tree leaf, the yellow and the greens are filtered out, essentially taking away that light harvesting, energy producing sunlight that comes through. That's what we mean when we talk about light quality. Light quantity, on the other hand, is the total duration. That is, how long during the day does that particular plant, in this case turf, actually see the sun. And so when you combine light quality with light quantity, you can determine whether or not a plant has a chance of even surviving in shade, whether it be dense shade or dappled shade, where you've just got little bits of spots of light and dark. Another common factor with shade is, does it come filtered through plant material? As we mentioned, that's when the yellows and the greens are absorbed and therefore the photosynthetic spectrum is disrupted. Or is it building shade on the north side of a building, for example? In that case, it's simply a reduction in quantity. But turf plants, and all plants for that matter, have a certain optimal level of light quality and quantity where they can survive, and not only survive but persist and give you the quality that you want in your particular landscape. Often people are curious about the light quantity and the light quality at their particular location. And until recently, there really wasn't a great device to do that. You can spend a lot of money and get a special device, but there's a new device on the market called the Light Scout. Not only does it do a snapshot measurement of your light quantity and quality, but it also does a daily light interval over a 24-hour period. So that can tell you whether a plant may or may not be able to survive in your particular situation. But the bottom line is there are differences among turfgrass species. If you have fairly dense shade, then you want to stick with the true fine fescues. Sheep, creeping red, hard fescues are all the true fine fescues, and they do quite well in the shade when managed correctly. The other possibility is turf-type tall fescue. It does fairly well in moderate shade, and then as we move out from turf-type tall fescue into bluegrass, there's some shade tolerant among that species, but generally bluegrass is not considered to be shade tolerant. And finally, we go to the warm season grasses. Buffalo grass and zoysia grass aren't very shade tolerant. They struggle in heavy shade or even moderate shade, so maybe that's not the choice if you have a lot of trees and that sort of thing in your yard. Now, what about management? You've made the right cultivar choice, you've made the right species choice about management. There's a couple of key points here. One, mow higher in the shade. You want to get as much photosynthetic capacity out of that leaf as you can. Two, reduce your nitrogen applications. Turf in the shade tends to be very succulent. And three, keep an eye out for disease, because in the shade, diseases like powdery mildew, brown patch, and others all tend to be more prevalent in the shade. So with that said, those are the three key points. Make the right choice in species, right choice in cultivar, and then manage it correctly, and you should have it made in the shade with your turfgrass selection.